Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. Today's story is titled, Millionaire Wins Lawsuit and Finds Out the Lawyer Who Saved Him Was His Childhood Sweetheart. The courtroom was still echoing with the sound of the gavel when Ethan Blake finally exhaled. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted his name, and the jury's decision had just cleared him of a multi-million-dollar fraud accusation. He had won. He should have felt victorious. But standing under the harsh fluorescent lights, the only thing he felt was exhaustion. Success, once again, felt like a cage built from glass and expectations. Through the blur of noise, one voice cut through calm, precise, professional. "Congratulations, Mr. Blake." He turned, and there she was. Clara Nguyen, the lead attorney who had fought tooth and nail to save his empire. Her hair was pinned neatly, her navy suit crisp, her posture unshakable. But her eyes, those deep brown eyes, carried a warmth that tugged at something he had not felt in decades. She extended her hand. Ethan hesitated for a heartbeat before shaking it. "You did well," he said quietly. "It was your evidence that turned the case." Clara smiled politely. "Just doing my job." She turned to leave, but he found himself watching her longer than he should have. There was something about the way she walked, measured, confident, yet familiar. He could not place it, but it stirred a ghost of memory from summers long past, a laugh on a small town street, a paper kite flying too high. Reporters swarmed, questions flying, but his thoughts stayed on her. Later that evening, as the city lights glowed against the glass walls of his penthouse, Ethan reviewed the day's coverage. Every headline screamed victory, but behind every word there was her face, the lawyer who saved him, the stranger who felt like home. And the truth he did not yet know, she was more than his attorney, she was the girl he once promised to find again. He leaned back in his chair, the weight of loneliness pressing harder than any lawsuit ever had. Maybe, he murmured to himself, winning is not everything after all. Outside, thunder rolled over the skyline. He glanced at the contract his PR manager had left on the table, a proposal to stabilize his public image through a strategic marriage arrangement. A fake relationship to repair trust. Ethan scoffed, running a hand through his hair. "A marriage for reputation," he said under his breath. What a ridiculous idea. But as fate would have it, by morning, that idea would no longer sound ridiculous. It would sound like the only way to keep the empire he built and to see Clara Nguyen again. The rain had not stopped the next morning. It streaked across the glass walls of the Blake Tower as Ethan stood by the window, his reflection divided between victory and emptiness. His assistant, a young man named Mark, entered quietly and placed a thick envelope on the marble desk. "It is from the PR department," he said. Ethan did not turn around. "Let me guess. More interviews, more smiling on camera." Mark hesitated. "Not exactly. It is a proposal for damage control. They believe the fastest way to restore the board's confidence is through a personal narrative, something human." Ethan finally looked at him. "A narrative? I am not a story, Mark." Mark cleared his throat. "They think a stable image, a marriage might help. A partner beside you could change the headlines." Ethan gave a low laugh, dry and humorless. "A marriage for reputation. That is absurd." But when Mark left, Ethan opened the folder anyway. On the cover page, the words were simple. Strategic Alliance Proposal. Beneath it, a single note from the PR director read, "Temporary marital contract. 6 months. Your choice of candidate. Legal counsel will handle all terms." He closed the folder, unimpressed until his eyes drifted to the corner of the room. Clara's business card sat there, left from yesterday's meeting. Her calm voice echoed in his memory. "Just doing my job." He picked up the card and turned it over in his hand. The idea began as a joke, but the longer he looked at her name, the less ridiculous it sounded. That evening, Clara sat alone in her small downtown office, surrounded by boxes of case files. The city hummed outside, but the light on her desk was dim. She was writing resignation papers. Her firm could not sustain the pressure after taking Ethan's controversial case. Her mother's medical bills had piled higher than the verdict she had just won. When the elevator chimed, she looked up, surprised. Ethan Blake stepped out, rain still glistening on his black coat. "Mr. Blake," she said, standing quickly, "you should not be here." "You saved my life," he replied simply. Now I think you might be the only person who can save my reputation." He placed the folder on her desk. She glanced down, frowning as she read the first line. "A contract marriage?" "Yes. 6 months," he said, his voice steady but low. "It is business. I need stability in the public eye, and you need financial security for your firm and your mother. I can make both happen." Clara stared at him in disbelief. "You cannot be serious." "I am," Ethan said. "You are logical, respected, and you already know my legal affairs better than anyone. This will be clean, controlled, and beneficial." She crossed her arms. "So, you are asking me to marry you for convenience. For protection," he corrected, "for both of us." The silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the city below. Clara wanted to laugh, but the sincerity in his tone stopped her. He was not playing games. "There would be conditions," she said finally. "Of course." He pulled out a page from the folder and slid it toward her. 3 of them, to be exact, she read aloud. 1. No personal involvement beyond public appearances. 2. Privacy is absolute. 3. Contract terminates upon mutual consent or 6 months, whichever comes first. She looked up. "You even drafted the terms already." "I am efficient," he said with a faint smile. Clara leaned back, studying him. The billionaire everyone feared in court was now standing in her office, asking for her trust not as a lawyer, but as a woman who had nothing left to lose. "And if I refuse?" she asked. "Then you walk away, and I wish you well," he said quietly. "But I will say this sometimes. The only way to rebuild something broken is to start with a contract." Her gaze dropped to the folder again. The offer was outrageous, but the numbers on the final page were undeniable. It would pay her debts, her mother's hospital stay, and secure her firm's survival. She exhaled slowly, heart pounding. "All right," she said. "You will have your contract, Mr. Blake. But understand this, I am a lawyer first. I do not fall in love with my clients." Ethan's expression softened. "That makes 2 of us." He extended his hand across the desk. For a moment neither moved. Then, with quiet resolve, she took it. The deal was sealed. Outside, the rain eased into a thin mist, and for the first time in days, the city lights flickered with something that looked almost like hope. 3 days later, the contract was signed under the golden light of Ethan's private office. The ink was still wet when Clara set down the pen and folded her hands in front of her. She had signed many agreements in her life, but none that came with a diamond ring. It sat in the velvet box between them, small but elegant, its sparkle caught in the reflection of the city skyline behind Ethan. He pushed the box toward her with quiet precision. "It is for appearances only," he said. "No one needs to know what is written between the lines." Clara nodded. "Understood. It is just business." "Exactly." His tone was calm, but the air carried a strange tension, like both of them were aware that something irreversible had just begun. Mark, the assistant, entered with a folder. "Mr. Blake, the press conference is scheduled for 4 o'clock. Ethan closed the ring box and rose to his full height. "Then let us begin this performance." The press room was a chaos of flashing bulbs and eager questions. When Ethan and Clara stepped onto the stage hand in hand, the crowd gasped. Rumors of a whirlwind romance had already filled the tabloids, and this sudden announcement sealed the narrative. After months of challenges, Ethan said into the microphone, his voice steady, "I have found someone who reminded me that integrity is not a slogan. It is a choice. I am proud to announce my engagement to Miss Clara Wynne." Applause erupted. Cameras clicked. Clara smiled gracefully, every gesture measured, her courtroom composure now serving her under 1,000 lights. As Ethan spoke, she could feel the weight of his hand in hers, firm yet controlled. They were playing a part, and they both knew the stakes. After the conference, they were ushered into a sleek black limousine. The tinted glass muted the sound of the crowd, leaving only the hum of the engine and the steady rhythm of rain against the roof. Clara leaned back, exhaling softly. "You handled that well," Ethan said, glancing at her. "You looked believable." "Years of defending clients who lie for a living," she replied dryly. He almost smiled. "Let us hope we can keep this one straight." The car pulled up in front of a luxury apartment complex overlooking the river. "This will be your temporary residence," he said. "The public expects us to live together. It will make the illusion stronger." Clara raised an eyebrow. "You have thought of everything. It is part of the plan." Inside, the apartment was vast marble floors, high ceilings, the faint scent of cedar, and expensive cologne. Ethan handed her a set of keys and a printed schedule. "There will be 5 public events in the next month. Charity gala, investor dinner, a magazine interview, and 2 family appearances. Our arrangement ends the moment the last one does. She took the schedule and scanned the list. You are very organized, Mr. Blake? You have no idea, he replied, a trace of dry humor in his voice. For a brief moment they stood in silence, 2 professionals pretending to be lovers inside a penthouse too beautiful to feel real. Clara broke the stillness. I will follow the contract to the letter. I expect you to do the same. Of course, Ethan said, his gaze steady. No feelings, no interference, only business. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. There is one more rule, he added quietly. In front of the world, we do not fake affection. We make them believe it. Clara met his eyes, unflinching. Then I hope you are a good actor. Ethan's expression softened for just a second. You will find out soon enough. When the door closed behind him, Clara stood alone in the vast silence, the city lights flickering through the rain-streaked windows. She slipped the ring onto her finger, feeling the cool metal settle against her skin. It was beautiful and completely meaningless. Or at least, that was what she told herself as she looked out over the skyline. Somewhere deep down, a quiet thought whispered that no contract, no matter how perfect, could keep the heart from rewriting its own terms. And for the first time since she had signed her name, Clara began to wonder which one of them had just made the bigger mistake. The following weeks unfolded like a carefully written script. Every morning, the tabloids praised their chemistry. Every evening, the cameras caught them stepping out of cars hand in hand. The city called them the power couple who had turned scandal into grace. Yet behind the glass walls of the penthouse, silence often filled the air between Ethan and Clara. They moved like 2 actors rehearsing lines neither of them believed. The first public event arrived sooner than expected. Ethan's stylist came with an army of assistants to transform Clara for the Blake Foundation charity gala. As the final pin settled into her hair, Clara barely recognized the woman in the mirror. The silver gown shimmered under the lights, elegant but not loud, refined but not fragile. You look perfect, the stylist said, stepping back. Clara smiled faintly. Perfection is an illusion. Downstairs, Ethan waited in a tailored black suit, the faint scent of cedar still following him. When he looked up and saw her descending the stairs, his breath caught for half a second before he masked it with a polite nod. Shall we, Mrs. Blake? He asked. For tonight, she replied evenly, placing her hand on his arm. The gala glittered with wealth and whispers. Chandeliers cast golden reflections on marble, and the city's elite buzzed with curiosity about the sudden engagement. As they entered the ballroom, hundreds of eyes turned toward them. Ethan's hand tightened slightly over hers, a silent cue. Clara smiled, graceful and composed, every gesture measured like a closing argument in court. The night unfolded smoothly until one of the board members, a sharp-tongued woman named Victoria, approached with a glass of champagne. Clara Newen, the miracle lawyer, she said with a smirk. You have done quite well for yourself. Tell me, was it love at first sight or just good timing? The air between them tightened. Ethan's jaw flexed, but before he could speak, Clara answered with calm precision. Timing helps, she said softly. But love, like justice, only lasts when it is built on truth. The crowd nearby murmured with approval, and Victoria's smile faltered. Ethan exhaled slowly, his grip easing. Nicely done, he whispered as they moved away. Years of court experience, she replied without looking at him. Later that night, after the speeches and the staged photographs, Clara slipped out onto the balcony to breathe. The city glittered below, distant and untouchable. A moment later, she heard the soft sound of footsteps. You disappeared, Ethan said quietly, stepping beside her. I needed air, she replied, eyes still on the skyline. Do you always run from rooms full of people who admire you? Admiration is not the same as understanding, she said. Most of them do not know me. They only know your version of me. Ethan leaned on the railing beside her, the tension in his shoulders easing. You handled tonight better than most of my executives. I have dealt with worse, she said, glancing at him. For a rare second, they both laughed soft, genuine, and unguarded. The laughter faded, but the silence that followed was warmer this time, less like strangers bound by paper, more like 2 people beginning to see the outlines of something real beneath the act. You know, Ethan said, turning toward her. I never expected this arrangement to feel easy. It is not easy, Clara replied, her tone softer. We are just pretending to be good at it. He smiled faintly. Maybe pretending is a skill we both share. For a moment, The world felt still, the city, the lights, the sound of the wind brushing against the glass. Then Clara stepped back, her voice returning to its steady tone. "We should go inside. People will talk." "They always do," Ethan said, but he followed her back in. As the night ended, the cameras caught one last shot of them walking side by side, her hand brushing his sleeve, his gaze fixed on her just long enough for the photo to capture something unspoken. By the next morning, that image would be everywhere, tagged with headlines calling them the couple who brought love back to Wall Street. Neither of them knew yet that behind the illusion, something genuine had already begun to stir, and neither contract nor caution could stop it from growing. The following month moved in a rhythm that felt almost too smooth. The public had accepted their marriage as genuine, investors regained confidence, and the headlines turned from scandal to admiration. Ethan and Clara had become the perfect illusion of stability. Every morning began with the same choreography: shared coffee in the penthouse kitchen, polite conversation about schedules, and separate cars waiting downstairs. Yet something small began to shift between the lines of that routine. It started with a glance that lingered too long, a smile that was not part of the act. One afternoon, Clara found Ethan in the conference room rehearsing a speech for an upcoming investor meeting. His tie was slightly uneven, his voice calm but tired. "You look like you have not slept in days," she said from the doorway. "I have not," he admitted. "The board expects miracles every quarter." She stepped closer and adjusted his tie without thinking. "You cannot save a company if you forget to save yourself." Their eyes met for a moment, and the air thickened with something neither could define. Before either could speak, Mark entered with a tablet, breaking the moment. "Sir, the car is ready." Ethan stepped back, clearing his throat. "Thank you, Mark. Clara, will you join me for the dinner tonight?" "It is the Foundation's anniversary." She hesitated. "Is it required by the contract?" "No," he said quietly. "It is not required." She looked at him for a long second before nodding. Then yes. That evening, the dinner hall glowed with soft golden lights and string music. As they entered together, Ethan's hand rested gently on the small of her back. It was a small, protective gesture that no camera could fully capture. When he introduced her to his senior partners, there was pride in his voice that felt too real to be rehearsed. During dinner, an elderly man approached their table. "Mr. Blake," he said with a kind smile, "you have chosen well. A woman like her gives balance to a man with too much ambition." Ethan glanced at Clara. "I am beginning to believe that," he said honestly. Later, while the crowd mingled, Clara stepped outside to the balcony overlooking the city. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain. Ethan joined her a few minutes later, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "You were remarkable tonight," he said, handing her one. "You make this charade look effortless." "That is what lawyers do," she said with a quiet laugh. "We make impossible things look manageable." He studied her face in the dim light, his expression softer than she had ever seen it. "You are more than manageable, Clara." She looked away, her heart skipping once before she steadied her breath. "Careful, Mr. Blake. Compliments sound dangerously close to emotion." "Maybe I am learning," he replied, "to feel something again." For a moment, silence wrapped around them like a fragile truce. Then thunder rumbled in the distance, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Clara laughed softly, looking up. "The weather does not care for grand speeches." "Neither do I," he said, watching her. "I prefer honesty." "And what is your honest thought right now?" she asked. Ethan hesitated, then spoke with quiet conviction. "That somewhere between pretending and surviving, I started forgetting which parts were fake." The words hung in the air, raw and dangerous. Clara stared at him, her pulse racing, but before she could answer, lightning flashed, and the event coordinator called them back inside. The moment dissolved, but its echo lingered. That night, back in the penthouse, Clara stood by the window, watching the storm roll across the skyline. She removed her earrings, her reflection blurred by rain on the glass. Behind her, Ethan passed by silently, stopping for a moment as if he wanted to speak, then changed his mind. "Good night, Clara," he said quietly. "Good night, Ethan," she replied. But when he left, her eyes followed him until the door closed. The house felt too large, the contract too small to hold what was slowly growing between them. Somewhere in that quiet storm, the line between act and truth had begun to disappear, and neither of them could turn it back. The storm that night did not stop at the windows. It stayed between them in the days that followed, quiet but persistent. The contract was still intact, but the rules had begun to blur. Ethan spent more time at the penthouse. no longer disappearing into endless board meetings. Clara noticed the subtle changes, how he made 2 cups of coffee instead of 1, how he paused before leaving each morning as if waiting for her to say something. One evening, after a long day reviewing case files, she walked into the living room to find him sitting by the fireplace with a glass of whiskey in his hand. The lights were low, the city glowing behind him. "You are home early," she said softly. "The meeting was shorter than expected," he replied. "I thought you might want to talk." She frowned slightly. "About what?" "About anything that is not written in that contract." His tone was gentle, almost hesitant. She sat across from him, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I am not sure how to do that. You are my client, my husband in name only. And yet you look at me as if I am more than that," he said quietly. The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. The fire crackled, filling the space between their breaths. "Tell me something real," Ethan said. "Not about work, about you." Clara hesitated, then said, "When I was 10, my father used to take me to a small park in the suburbs. We would build paper kites together, even though they never flew very high. The last one we made had my initials painted on it. He said one day I would fly higher than any kite." Her voice softened. "He died a month later." Ethan listened, unmoving. "I am sorry," he said finally. "I did not know." "There are many things people do not know," she said. "Sometimes it is easier to hide behind contracts than to face what hurts." He looked at her for a long time before speaking again. "When I was 16, I made a promise to a girl in that same park. She had the brightest laugh I had ever heard. I told her I would find her again when I became someone worth finding." Clara's breath caught, but she said nothing. Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe I did find her, only she does not remember me." She looked away, her pulse quickening. "Coincidences are dangerous things to believe in, Mr. Blake." "Maybe," he said. "But so is pretending nothing has changed." That night, the distance between them grew smaller. Not with words, but with understanding. As the weeks passed, their partnership began to feel less like an arrangement and more like a quiet rhythm that made sense. He started asking about her cases. She began attending his board meetings. Their conversations deepened, slipping from polite formality into something closer to honesty. One evening, after a long day at the foundation, Ethan found Clara asleep at her desk, her head resting on a pile of documents. The lamplight framed her face in gold. He placed a blanket over her shoulders and lingered for a moment. "You are stronger than you know," he whispered. The words were lost in the quiet, but something inside him shifted. Later, when she woke and saw the blanket, she smiled to herself without asking who had placed it there. Days turned into weeks, and with every passing hour, the walls between them thinned. During a late dinner on the balcony, Ethan finally asked, "Do you ever think about what happens when the contract ends?" Clara's fork paused midair. "I try not to," she said. "It makes everything complicated." "It already is," he admitted. "Then maybe it is better to leave it where it is." "Maybe," he said, but his eyes told a different story. The rain began again, soft and steady, washing over the glass railing. He reached out, brushing a drop from her wrist. "You are cold," he murmured. "You should go inside." She looked at him, her heart torn between reason and something deeper. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Clara," he said. But as she walked away, he knew that somewhere between the rules they had written, love had already found its way in, and it would not stay hidden for long. The illusion of peace did not last. It ended the morning Clara arrived at the office to find reporters crowded outside the lobby. Flashbulbs burst, microphones thrust forward, and voices clashed over one another shouting her name. "Miss Wynne, is it true your marriage to Ethan Blake is fake?" Her pulse raced. Someone had leaked the contract. She pushed through the crowd, keeping her head down, her mind spinning. When she reached her office, Ethan was already there, standing by the window with a tablet in his hand. The headline glowed across the screen. "Contract Marriage Exposed." Her heart sank. "Who did this?" she asked. Ethan's expression was unreadable. "Someone inside the company, maybe an old rival. It does not matter now. The damage is done." "They will destroy my career," she said quietly. "The Bar Association will demand an inquiry." "I will handle it," Ethan replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "No," she said, stepping closer. "This is my reputation, not yours." He turned to her, his jaw tight. "You think this is easy for me? The board will use this to remove me. They will say I manipulated the public. Everything I built could vanish overnight." Maybe that is the price of pretending, she said bitterly. We knew this could happen. You agreed to this, Clara, he said sharply. Do not act like I forced you. The words hit her like a slap. I did it to save my mother, to save my firm, she said, her voice shaking. I did it because you promised it would be safe. And it was, until someone decided to betray us. The tension between them cracked. Clara's eyes glistened, but she refused to cry. You always think you can fix everything with power and money. But this, she gestured toward the tablet, this was never just business. You made it personal the moment you looked at me like I was more than a name on a contract. Ethan's voice softened, regret flickering behind his anger. Clara, I never meant. Do not, she said, cutting him off. Do not tell me what you meant. Just tell me it was all part of your plan. He did not answer. The silence was her answer. She picked up her bag, her movements trembling but steady. Our deal is over, she said quietly. I will contact the bar myself and face the consequences. Ethan reached out, but she stepped back. Clara, goodbye, Mr. Blake. She walked out without looking back, leaving the echo of her heels and the weight of everything unsaid behind her. By nightfall, every news channel carried the story. Commentators debated motives, investors panicked, and Clara's face appeared on every headline beside words like fraud and scandal. Alone in the penthouse, Ethan watched the chaos unfold. For the first time in years, he had no statement to give, no defense to craft. He simply sat in the dark, replaying every moment with her, the laughter on the balcony, the coffee in the mornings, the softness in her eyes when she thought he was not looking. The phone rang again and again, but he ignored it. The city outside moved on without him, and for the first time, Ethan Blake, the man who always had control, realized he had lost the only thing that had ever truly mattered. 3 days passed in silence. Clara's phone was flooded with calls from journalists, clients, and the ethics board. She had spent each day drafting statements, only to delete them, knowing that no arrangement of words could fix the truth. The contract existed. The world knew. On the 4th morning, she turned on the television, and there he was, Ethan Blake, standing behind a podium at a press conference. His hair was slightly disheveled, his eyes hollow but determined. The reporter's noise faded as he began to speak. You have all read the headlines, he said. You know about the contract, the arrangement, and the scandal. But what you do not know is that it started as an act of protection. I asked Clara Nguyen to stand beside me because I was a man drowning in his own mistakes. She gave me stability when the world was ready to tear me apart. The fault is mine, not hers. The crowd buzzed, questions flying, but he raised his hand. If anyone deserves blame, it is me. If anyone deserves respect, it is her. I never paid her to love me, but I fell in love with her all the same. Clara froze in front of the screen. The words struck her harder than she expected. For the first time since everything collapsed, she felt her chest tighten, not from anger, but from something that felt like truth. Later that evening, she received an email from the Bar Association. Temporary suspension pending review. She closed the laptop and stared at the city outside, glowing gold beneath the setting Sunday. Then she saw the envelope on her desk, a handwritten note with no name. Inside was a check made out to her mother's hospital and a small piece of paper that read, "Sometimes, justice means taking the blame." She knew his handwriting. The next morning, she went to the foundation's headquarters. The security guards hesitated before letting her through, but when she reached the conference hall, Ethan was still there, clearing out his desk. You should not be here, he said quietly. Neither should you, she replied. You gave up your position. He smiled faintly. It was time. The board needed a clean image, and I was not it. She set the envelope on his desk. You paid my mother's bills. You did not have to. I did, he said simply. I owed you that much. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she asked, why did you say those things at the conference? You could have denied it all. Because it was true, Ethan said. For the first time in years, I wanted to tell the truth. I do not care about my company, my title, or my image. I care about you. Her eyes softened, but her voice trembled. You destroyed your career for me. No, he said gently. You gave me one worth having. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the original contract, folded and worn. I wanted to end this properly. He tore the paper in half, the sound sharp and final. No more contracts, Clara. No more pretending. She looked at him, tears finally breaking through. What happens now? Now, he said, we start over without signatures, without lies, only choice. For a moment, They stood still, two people stripped of everything but honesty. And as the torn papers fell between them, both knew that this was not the end. It was the beginning of something real. 1 year later, the city skyline looked different. The glass tower that once bore Ethan's name now displayed a new sign, the Second Chance Foundation. Inside the main hall, laughter and music filled the air as people gathered for the charity's first anniversary gala. Ethan stood near the entrance, dressed in a simple black suit, greeting guests with calm sincerity. There were no cameras chasing him, no reporters shouting his name, only quiet respect for the man who had turned scandal into redemption. Across the room, Clara was finishing her speech on stage. Her voice was steady, confident, and warm. This foundation was built not on power or wealth, she said, but on the belief that people can rebuild from their mistakes. Justice is not about punishment, it is about transformation. As the audience applauded, she looked down and found Ethan standing near the front, his gaze steady, a small smile playing on his lips. When the ceremony ended, she stepped off the stage, and for a moment, the crowd disappeared around them. "You kept your promise," she said softly. "You turned it into something good. You helped me see what good actually looks like," he replied. They walked together toward the exhibit room, where framed photographs lined the walls, volunteers, families, and small businesses the foundation had helped during the past year. In the center of the room, inside a glass case, rested two objects, a torn contract, preserved between sheets of glass, and a gold pen. Clara's eyes widened. "You kept it?" "I kept what reminded me how we began," Ethan said. "And how we chose to end it." She smiled, shaking her head. "That is hardly romantic. It is honest," he said, his tone gentle. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. "Ethan, no contracts this time," he said, opening it to reveal a simple silver ring. "No signatures, no conditions, just truth." The crowd in the background began to quiet as if sensing something significant unfolding. Clara blinked back the tears that threatened to fall. "Are you sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything," he said. "Everything I built before was a transaction. This is a choice." She looked down at the ring, then back at him. "You know, I once told you that I do not fall in love with my clients." "Good," Ethan said with a soft laugh. "Because I stopped being your client a long time ago." The laughter that followed was quiet and real. She nodded slowly. "Then I guess my answer is yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and the hall erupted in applause as if the entire room had been waiting for that moment. When she looked at him again, the light caught the silver band, simple but perfect, gleaming like a new beginning. Later that night, they stood on the balcony overlooking the city. The wind carried the faint echo of music from inside, and the skyline shimmered like a promise reborn. Ethan took her hand and said softly, "Contracts end, love does not." She smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "Then let us make sure this one lasts forever." And as the lights of the city stretched out before them, they both knew that this time, the story they had written together was no longer a performance, it was the truth.